Bombshell tonight in the Nolan Wells investigation. Tonight, a Nolan Wells phone evidence torpedo. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
All but, I believe, one took a polygraph, and from what was told to me, that they all passed.
Nancy, my clients have not taken a polygraph test.
Nobody's guilty, and everybody's a suspect. We don't know the truth yet, but we will.
We have had multiple witnesses reach out to us, two confirmed witnesses that saw Nolan Wells on the island around 6 p.m. on July 4th, well after the Triton, as you said, left around 4:30. And so those witnesses have went to investigators, they've talked to the police, and they've done what they're supposed to do. These witnesses know Nolan. They've known him for a long time. They were able to make a positive ID. And they told that to investigators. They told them that from the very start.
What witnesses? Where? Who, what, where, why, and when? That is a renowned trial lawyer named Tyler Cox, and he is representing the acquaintances of Nolan's that took him to Horn Island on their boat, the Triton. Curious, we've seen, hey, let's pull up that video control room of everyone getting on the boat before they went to Horn Island. It's very interesting, evidentiarily. Okay, here we go. This was from the Officer Tatum show, and you're about to see people. There they are down at the right. And there's actual video of people see the boat at about 1 o'clock. Oh, there we go. Excellent shot, guys. People are getting on, people getting off. And it keeps going to where you see everybody that got on the boat. But here's my big question tonight, before I can even get to the alleged witnesses that Tyler Cox is telling us about. Dave Mack, joining me, Crime Stories investigative reporter. Can I see the video again, please? Dave Mack, I'm seeing everybody preparing the Triton to go out, preparing to go out. In this shot, they're down at about 3 o'clock. Okay, keep looking. 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And then suddenly you switch to a different camera. There you go. That's the boat. So, Dave Mack, where is the evidence? Where is the video of the boat? Is that Nolan right there? Walking along the light blue shorts, and he at that time had on a white shirt. I think that's Nolan right there. Dave Mack, where is the evidence, the video evidence of them coming back?
Nancy, we have not seen evidence of them coming back. Remember, 3 boats caravanned out to the island, and then we have different stories about when they arrived back on the mainland. But we don't have video of any of them showing back up. So we don't have that
video.
Correct.
Okay, let's circle back to the alleged witnesses that... He's a great trial lawyer, by the way. Wins a lot of cases. This Tyler Cox, he's representing the acquaintances that went to Horn Island with Nolan. I've got to get to the phone torpedo, but he's not the only one that says they have witnesses. Listen.
These 2 witnesses, 2 very reliable, very credible, and very upstanding members of the community, they saw Nolan. And they've known Nolan for years. There's no chance that they made a mistake. And by the way, this can be corroborated through other evidence, other eyewitness accounts. And that's the end of it right there.
That's from the Officer Tatum show. Susan Hendricks joining me, veteran, investigative journalist, author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. What witnesses? I understand that there's video and witnesses. One places him there at 5, one places him there at 6. Significance, the Triton, and we can show this by GPS. They are right about this, left Horn Island around 4:30. So if he is spotted, and you can confirm to me that he is spotted there at 5 or 6, If that video has a timestamp on it and I can corroborate that, or I can corroborate the witnesses weren't drunk. Hey, let's see that video control room again of Nolan bent over and all you can see is his blue trunk right there. Now that's not a very good eyewitness right there, okay? Do I think that's him? Yeah, I do. I do think that's Nolan. But I would tear that up in court. Tear it to shreds. There's all sorts of, you know what? Hold on, Susan Hendricks. Greg Morse joining me, veteran trial lawyer, founder of Morse Legal. He's in the Southern District of Florida, former West Palm Beach public defender, and author of The Untested. Greg, in Florida, as in Georgia, as in this jurisdiction of Mississippi, the code, the official code of Mississippi, annotated, lays out how you establish or cross-examine, same thing, same criteria, an eyewitness, such as, I memorized them. How far were you away from the witness? From the target. What was the lighting? Do you wear glasses? Were you wearing them that night? Were you inebriated? Had you smoked pot? How can you prove that to me? Did anything obstruct your view? Was it daytime or nighttime? What time of the day was it? What were the conditions? You go on and on and on. You can rattle them off, right? I know you can. So
absolutely.
How do I know the eyewitness can't identify anything except the back of his legs, like in that video?
Well, that's the thing. There's no details about any identification. It's just a broad statement that other people saw Nolan after the boat left. The video you just showed shows from a view from behind of someone bending over. Did the person have sunglasses on? Were they familiar with who they were actually looking at and identifying? How much had they drank during the day? It was a party scene. That's what usually these boat spots are. There's one by me in West Palm Beach, very similar setup called Peanut Island. So most people also, right, they don't think something's important until after the fact. They're just going about their day, notice people walking by. So from what you showed, that's not a very strong identification from that position, but there's no details.
While I've got you, Greg Morse, let me throw another question at you. And look, I'm not wearing a prosecution or a defense hat. As you know, I'm a crime victim. I would say I'm coming at it from that angle. But I was very disturbed, Greg, when I got wind that there is no criminal investigation. It's been said over and over and over. Why not? We don't know how he died. For instance, if he did have water in his lungs, okay, maybe he did drown. But how did he get in the water? Did he fall in the water? Was somebody, wrestling with him in the water and they held him down? They went, oh, my stars, I killed him and left. Did he hit his head?
Well,
There's a lot more to it than saying, oh, yeah, he drowned. How can someone state there is no criminal investigation? I understand a grand jury is about to be convened. That doesn't mean there's a crime, but doesn't that suggest to you a grand jury inside the Superior Courthouse, inside the district attorney's office, would suggest there is a criminal investigation?
Well, it would potentially lead someone to believe that, yeah, a criminal investigation was undergoing. However, when we look at how this has played out over the last 6 weeks, how law enforcement has acted, they haven't seized Nolan Wells' phone at this point. In a criminal investigation, law enforcement's going to use those tools to get this information.
Are you
this could
sitting
just
down,
be a
Morris?
drowning. I'm sitting down, and this could just be a drowning. And that's why they're looking at it that way, because nothing's told them
it's yet.
But everything not a crime. It doesn't have to be investigated as a crime.
You're still talking. We've already established that. Here's the other, you know what? I'm going to let you think about what you just said. I'm going to go to Jeff Shetler joining us. Guys, this is a special guest joining us out of Edisto Island, South Carolina. Former police K-9 handler, author of 5 books. Last one, 2 weeks to operational tracking. I like this one, Red Dog Rising, K-9 trailing, the straightest path, tactical tracker teams, the Tao of trailing. He is at gak9.com. Question, I get this a lot from the viewers, so you can put it to rest. How long does a person have to be dead before a cadaver dog will pick up on that scent?
Well, honestly, a dog's going to pick up on the live or dead scent as soon as they're out there. So the time frame from hours to a day or so is really not a big deal. It doesn't matter what type of dog you have that's looking for humans. Within that first 24 hours, either type of dog, a live find or a deceased person dog, is going to be viable. They're going to pick up on anything that's there. The big issue that we have here is primarily the contamination. After the fact, if the dog was placed at the scene initially to search for our victim, then the chances are the success rate would actually be pretty good. The island is very, very small. There's not a lot of hiding places. There's not a lot of places he could go. On the other hand, inside the water might be a different story. We have tide issues and everything else that are occurring there.
So you bring in a scent dog. I would assume you bring in a scent dog first. But the issue with that, in my mind, probatively, like what can I use? How can I use that trial? What's it going to prove for me? I already know Nolan was on the boat to start with. So, of course, the dog is going to pick up Nolan's scent on the boat. That's not hard to figure out. So I know a scent dog is going to pick up on that. But a cadaver dog, what should have been done immediately with a cadaver dog? And I'm putting this out there not to say woulda, coulda, shoulda. Maybe it happened and we haven't been informed. The press, the media, has no right to information in an ongoing investigation. So this may have been done and we haven't been told. I can only pray. So regarding a cadaver dog, what should have been done, Jeff Shetler, and how should it have been done, and when should it have been done?
Lock down the location. Don't let anybody on there. Get the dogs in. See what type of reaction they have. Every second that goes by, every minute that goes by, every hour that goes by will have an impact on the dog work when it comes to age of the material, age of the odor, and more importantly, what your contamination factor is. And this is the one big thing that nobody ever really thinks about. That they think the dogs are going to be these magical creatures that detect everything that you're looking for. But that's going to be mitigated dramatically by any type of human activity on the scene. That's the first thing that has to happen. So if you're going to use dogs, you need to get them out there right away. They actually have to be one of the first things on scene.
Out to Joseph Scott Morgan, Professor of Forensics, Jacksonville State University. You can find his hit YouTube show, Body Bags with Joe Scott Morgan. But most important, he is a death investigator with over 10,000 death scenes under his belt. Isn't it true, Joe Scott, that a cadaver dog, aka a human remains detection dog, can absolutely detect the scent of a dead person as early as 45 minutes to 3 hours after the death because of the cellular breakdown in organic compounds? Could you translate what I just said, which I've said in court before, into regular people talk?
Yeah, so our building blocks are cells, and so those cells begin to break down. And you're right. People don't understand that human decomposition literally begins at a cellular level the moment we're gone, okay? So the two compounds that you're looking for here when it comes to cadaver searches utilizing canine assets are putrescine and cadaverine, or cadaverine as well. And what they are, they're an organic compound that combine as a result of the cellular breakdown, and it gives off a particular odor. Now, to what Jeff was saying just a moment ago, if there is some type of, let's just say, blood evidence, all right, on the boat, that I pray this boat was locked down quickly. If there's a point of impact, say, for instance, on a railing, any of the gunnels in there, those areas in there, and you have blood deposition, guess what happens, Nancy? That blood begins to break down, just like a body does, okay? So you'll have the scent that is there, and it is wholly different than tracking a human, all right? Now, where else would you find it? Well, we know that Nolan's remains are allegedly found on the shore, right? They're allegedly right there. Now, we also know, and remember what the second autopsy said, he's in an advanced state of decomposition at this point in time. So the trick is here trying to understand.
That's when he's found on the beach. Hold on.
Exactly.
Joe Scott, that's when he's found on the beach. But My understanding, and of course, I'm just a trial lawyer. I'm not a canine expert like Jeff Shetler is, but
Yeah.
within minutes to hours, within minutes, dogs can pick up on the scent of human decomp. It starts almost immediately, and the dog can smell that.
You can say within 45 minutes, but I have to tell you, there is a lot of variability here, dependent upon a lot of environmental conditions, even the individual that is decomposing. That's going to play into it. So that's not a static number. It's a bracketed number. So you don't know how long
Right.
it's going to take for this to actually begin to develop.
We also know that well-trained dogs, like Jeff Shetler works with, can still hit on decomp, even microscopic particles in soil, long after the body has been removed, sometimes years or even decades later, depending on the condition. But as Shetler just pointed out, in these conditions, where the surface of the boat is exposed to water, to wind, to contamination, not so much. I'm going to circle back to Jeff in just a moment regarding any possibility of tracking human decomp or human scent on Horn Island. The thing is, we know he was there, so we know the dogs will hit on him being there alive. But what about dead? I also want to clear something else up, and this is really important. Greg Morse, these acquaintances that went out on the beach, I'm not razor locked on them. I'm looking at them. I'm looking at everybody. Who are these two witnesses? If they are telling the truth, that Nolan Wells was on Horn Island at either 5 or 6 o'clock, then the acquaintances on the Triton are in the clear. Because Morse, I know, based on their GPS, what time they left the island. So we have to keep our minds open as to what, who, what, where, why, the whole shebang. We can't lock in on those acquaintances if they had already left and he's still on the island. Is that true? I don't know. But it could be, right? Many an investigation has failed because the prosecutor did not keep their mind open as to potential suspects, right?
Well, that's 100% right. You know, the police have to keep an open mind here. It's not even a criminal investigation. So 6 weeks approximately has gone by. The folks that were on the boat with Nolan, nothing has come out even remotely to indicate they were involved in some foul play at this point at all. They're just people that went out to this island with their friend. It appears their friend may have stayed afterwards, and maybe a tragedy happened. Maybe something else happened that wasn't involving them.
A tragedy did happen.
6
Nolan
weeks.
Wells is dead, and I'm going to find out how. But I tell you
Sure,
what,
but you're talking
I
about
am
6
curious
weeks.
about
This is
why no
this is
polygraphs have been
isolated.
taken. I'm just
Why?
very curious.
But why?
But many
Why?
defense
For
lawyers
what?
wouldn't dream of letting their
They're
client
not
take calls.
suspects.
Let me get to
But
the phone.
Nancy, you're turning
Oh, dear Lord.
what's not
Of
a
course they're
criminal
not suspects. You said
investigation
that
and
10
want the
times. You're
trappings
wasting my
of
time.
one.
Stop it.
But when you talk about
I see his
polygraph,
lips moving. I hear. Okay, yeah, just keep him just like that. Yeah, that's the way I like Morse. Don't hurt your head, Morse. Don't hurt your head. Okay. Susan Hendricks. Oh, my stars, Hendricks. The family is now seemingly being accused of wrongdoing because they haven't handed the phone over yet. What happened back on, I've got a big note here, phone July 15. Isn't that when the family had a meeting and said, yes, you can have the phone, but they want independent examiners there at the same time, right? Tell me July 15, what happened?
July 15th, the attorney for the parents of Nolan met and said, yes, we want to give over the phone, but we want someone in the middle here, someone from the outside, an expert to analyze the phone. It appeared everyone agreed. Then all of a sudden they get a letter saying, we want the phone and you have 24 hours to send it over. The DA sent that. And the parents were out of town and said, wait, we don't have the time to do that. Hence the narrative that they're not cooperating. Now they say, Nolan's parents, look, we have our experts on standby this week, pick a day. And not to mention on the 19th would have been Nolan's 19th birthday, a difficult week for the family, but they say, hey, we'll give up his cell phone. We want someone, a mediator, if you will, an expert in the middle.
Well, you know, this is interesting, what you just said. Joe Scott Morgan, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, which has, I've been there, and it is a world-class Crim Pro division. Whole building, whole floor is set up just to recreate scenes. I was so impressed by it. Joe Scott has worked with me on multiple recreations, intricate recreations at Jacksonville State University to try to figure out, is what the defendant is saying, does that make sense? Is what the state is saying, does that make sense? Just all sorts of things you can learn from actually recreating the scene. That said, Joe Scott, I have examined evidence myself at the crime lab, and you know the crime lab out on Panthersville Road is amazing, state of the art, with the defense attorney there. Mm-hmm. And I typically would not allow a defense team to examine the evidence unless I was there. Do I think they're going to do something nefarious? Maybe, probably not, but I don't want them to even touch it if it could somehow, you know, compromise the evidence. And it can. A lot of the times, even touching it can compromise the evidence. So this is not unheard of, that the family wants an independent investigator there when the phone is searched.
Yeah, you're right. And it happens. Nancy, I've actually been in autopsy suites with defense attorneys, believe it or not. All manner of people come through the labs over the years as an independent set of eyes. So let's just say that they do, in fact, have an independent individual examine this phone. And I think this question goes back to you as a prosecuting attorney. Would any kind of findings that were on that phone, would they be negated as a result of the state not doing? You know, if you wanted to move forward as using this evidence in a criminal prosecution, perhaps, would it invalidate it since the state is not doing it? And what are you going to find? And how many hands are going to be on this phone at that given time?
Are you saying that if the defense did their own investigation of the phone and the state did not, would that negate the defense findings?
Yeah, because remember, we've got a grand jury that's going to be
let me
impaneled,
tell you,
allegedly.
HELLYES. Because the first thing, if the shoe was on the other foot, I would do is, isn't it true? I gave you the opportunity to review the phone. Isn't that true? On this date. And you didn't do it. So don't come complaining now. Oh yeah, that would be a matter for cross-exam. Morse, everybody jump in if you've got a question for Scott Eicher. Let me tell you who Eicher is. Digital forensics expert, founding member of the FBI Cellular Analysis Survey Team, historical cellular analysis expert, former FBI, 22 years, former homicide, Norfolk, Virginia Police Department, works multiple cases, and currently with precision cellular analysis. I could go on. Scott, tell me how this examination, I mean, you don't just pick up the phone and go, okay, I looked at it. What is a phone examination? How do I get evidence of potential snaps that were sent that day, texts, emails, photos taken during those critical hours? And important, how do I find out if anything was deleted? We've heard, yes, it's deleted. No, it wasn't deleted. The only way we're going to know is from a forensics exam. How do you do it? Now, take baby steps. Go ahead.
It's pretty easy nowadays. You get the physical phone itself. You hook it up to a device like the Cellbrite, which is one of the main producers of this type of software that can download phones. First of all, obviously, you have to have the password to the phone. If not, then you have to go through a lot of processes to get past the password and into the phone. But once you're into the phone, and this can be done with other people standing by, as you were talking about, another investigator for the defense or for the family or something like that being there, they can sit there and watch you download the phone. And basically, once you download a copy of what's on the phone, and you're not really messing with the evidence that's on the phone, you're not changing it, you're just copying it to another computer, and then you can start going through that data. You can look at all the text messages, and it'll even let you know which ones have been deleted. Now, of course, deleted means, it's
Put them
in
up,
kind of
please.
computer
Put them up,
terms.
please. What do you see when you're looking for deleted? Do you see like you log on and you just see all this data, X's and O's and digits, and how do I tell something's been deleted? Explain that to me. I mean, unless it's in recently deleted, but even my twins at age 3 knew how to go into my phone and find recently deleted and delete it. How do you find it?
So it's actually just, on the computer screen, you're looking at all the lists of text messages, and it says right to the right of it, this one was deleted. So in an aspect, if it hadn't been overwritten, think about how computers work. You delete something just like a phone. You delete something, it kind of takes it and moves it into a non-use to an area you're not using. And then once, if the phone starts getting full, it starts writing over that deleted stuff. So things that were deleted at some point in time are still there and can be recovered. The actual texts of the text message, the content of the text message is still there until it's getting written over by the phone.
Scott Eicher, has your company, Precision Cellular Analysis, performed these independent examinations of phones?
Yes, they have. We have a whole group of individuals in our company that just specialize in downloading phones, rebuilding phones that are damaged so that the data can be pulled from the phone, and breaking into the phones if we don't have the password.
What is Cellebrite and how is it used?
It's a program that's been around for a good amount of time, probably 15 years, and each year it gets more updated, but it's a program that actually goes into the phone and allows you to copy the information from the phone onto a different computer. And then you can look at that data and spend time going through it, get all the chronological information from text messages to pictures to Snapchat. So you can get a timeline from all these different areas of the phone.
What about a digital forensics go bag? A portable data collection rig. We saw it in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. It was used when the investigators went into the Guthrie family home. You see it on field operations, intelligence, digital forensics. They extract or they mirror digital info right there on location. A tactical exploitation kit like a forensics go bag.
Yes, those are available, and basically Cellbrite is that also. It's more for phones, but you can have the same type of device for computers and for other devices in the home. But Cellbrite is also a portable device that you can take to a crime scene, take to a house, or go to a individual's residence and do that download. It doesn't have to be done in the office.
According to the family, they have made the phone and their independent experts readily available.
The Jackson County DA's office, as well as our forensic team, and possibly the FBI, we're going to together download and examine the phone. So it's done one time with everybody together, right? This is very common in the law. This is what is supposed to happen. We're waiting for the DA to determine the time, the place, the date. Let us know, and we are going to be there with our forensics team and anybody else, but it's done one time, one examination. We're ready for it to happen.
from our friends at WLOX. That's Liza Park, working with Nolan's mother. To you, Susan Hendricks, now somehow it's made to look like the family, Nolan's family, is not cooperating. Let me understand what has happened. So Nolan's family went out of state. I don't know why. And while they were gone, they get a demand letter from the DA's office.
Yeah, that said you have 24 hours. And they were at the NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists conference in Georgia. They spoke on stage and they said, wait a minute, we're not there. We can't do that. I thought we agreed on July 15th at that meeting that we would come together and do this. And now you're acting like we're not cooperating, but we are. So then they came back now, Nolan's family attorney, saying, okay, any day this week, we need 24 hours notice and we'll make it happen. They're not hiding the phone. They just don't trust for the DA to have the phone alone without an independent investigation into the phone, someone who's not biased.
And, you know, Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter, the family is afraid. Many people have seen injustice in other cases that have nothing to do with them. And I believe they fear evidence will be destroyed or mishandled, and it can never be recaptured. It's very possible it could never be recaptured. I mean, you and I and Joe Scott, you did an incredible recreation in the Ellen Greenberg case, remember? Ellen Greenberg stabbed, I think, 20 plus times, including the back of the head, the back of the neck, the back, actually severing the dura of her spinal cord. And the ruling was suicide. Okay, this is what I'm leading up to. So,
yes, ma'am.
All of the evidence was not documented at the scene. The police told, this is in Philly, told the apartment manager, sure, clean it up. As a matter of fact, here's a professional cleaner. Call them. They had it professionally cleaned. Bye-bye, evidence. Gone. Not only that, the apartment manager took a video of the inside of Ellen's apartment to show basically, look, this is how it was before, this is how it is after. We want to prove we didn't take anything, we didn't steal anything, everything is accounted for. And that's SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. So when they didn't process the crime scene, they went, oh, thank goodness, at least we have the video. They handed the video over to Philly PD, and they lost it.
Yeah.
Just let that
There's one more thing. There's one more thing that kind of ties back to. There's one more thing that kind of ties back to Nolan's case here as well, and that's the fact that with Ellen, I don't know if you recall this, the computer made it out of there as well. Do you recall that? And that was never examined, right? And so that's, you know, again, we're left wanting, Nancy,
Ellen's
relative to all of the data.
With all of the info leading up to the time of her murder, ruled suicide, taken off the scene. Now, I'm not claiming that the people that took it, they were family members of the fiance. For all I know, they took it because they didn't want anybody to steal it. And nothing nefarious happened. But the problem is, you lock down a scene. I mean, look what's happened to Nancy Guthrie. A pizza delivery guy came and walked right over the blood evidence to deliver a pizza. Same thing here, Dave Mack. I get why the Nolan Wells family is fearful.
Well, you know, Nancy, this investigation, I'm putting air quotes in that because if you remember early on, it was a drowning, you know, and no investigation had even been done. You realize he was missing. You know, it wasn't like it was hours and they went back and he was missing for almost 2 days. And the family early on was not getting information that they felt like they should. All they're saying is, we want to be assured of the chain of custody, how the extraction on this phone is going to be performed, who would have access to the extracted data. That's important. Preservation of the evidence, and then when is this phone going to be returned to us? This is the last thing they have of their son. And those things that I just mentioned, those were the items discussed on July 15th. And there was no follow-up after that until August 12th, when the DA's office, tells the family, well, you got 48 hours to turn the phone over, and they were out of town. So, yeah, there's a lot going on with the most important part of the evidence.
So there was no way by the time
have.
they find out about the letter that they could comply with the 48-hour requirement.
His phone made it back to shore. He didn't. Somewhere between a 4th of July afternoon and the boat pulling away from the island, an 18-year-old vanished from a stretch of sand 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, and the only thing that came back with his friends was the device in his pocket. 2 days later, a park ranger found the rest of him. What happened in between is still, right now, an open question. One that's pulled in a sheriff's department, 2 separate autopsies, the FBI, a sitting judge, members of Congress, and a recording nobody can agree on the meaning of. Some of what you're about to hear will be disputed by the people who were there. Some of it hasn't been explained by anyone at all. We're not giving you the whole picture yet. We're giving you the version that's been verified, piece by piece, in the order it actually happened. Stay with us, because what this case turns into by the end is not what it looks like right now. Before we go further, this case involves the death of a teenager, and while we don't include graphic detail, some of what's ahead is heavy. Watch accordingly. Welcome back if you're already part of this channel, and if this is your first time here, welcome. Drop where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've stuck with us through this case already, sharing it, commenting, subscribing, thank you. That's the only reason stories like this one don't get buried. July 4th, 2026. Somewhere off the coast of Mississippi, a dispatcher picks up a distress call. A boat is taking on water. 7 people are on board. The caller sounds rattled, the connection breaks up, and for several seconds, nobody listening can make out every word. That call should have ended as a routine boating report, one of hundreds filed on a holiday weekend along the Gulf Coast. Instead, it became the center of a national obsession. Weeks later, a different version of that same audio surfaced online, longer, sharper, allegedly enhanced. And in it, some listeners swore they could make out something else buried under the static. A phrase, a question, something that sounded less like an emergency call and more like an accusation. Digital forensics experts don't agree on what's in that recording. One says the enhanced version doesn't match the original. Another, a retired FBI agent, says there's nothing sinister in it whatsoever. But while the internet argued over audio waveforms, an 18-year-old was already missing. Within 48 hours, he'd be found dead on a barrier island most Americans had never heard of. His name was Nolan Wells. More than a month later, after 2 autopsies, a federal investigation into death threats made against witnesses, and a grand jury still waiting to convene, nobody officially knows how he died. This case is still unfolding, and there's more to come. Subscribe now to stay ahead of it, because what that call actually captured is only the beginning. This is where it starts. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a small coastal city inside Jackson County on the Gulf. It was the kind of place where everybody's kid seems to know everybody else's kid. Nolan was one of theirs. In 2025, he graduated from Ocean Springs High School, and that fall he enrolled at Southwest Mississippi Community College as a wide receiver, his first season away from the coast, chasing the kind of future built on Saturday afternoons and hard-earned scholarships. It's a 2-year school in the southwestern part of the state, far from the coastline where he grew up, and the friends he'd spend that July 4th with. His mother, Christine Wells Wansley, worked as a nurse practitioner. His father, Elmore Wansley, stood beside her through everything that followed. In the summer of 2026, neither of them could have known how much after there would be. By the time his family buried him, the case had already outgrown their hometown. Nolan's funeral was held at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs. Reverend Al Sharpton delivered the eulogy, a sign of how fast this had become more than a local story. Actor Tyler Perry covered the funeral costs, a detail that made headlines almost as quickly as the boy's name did. For his parents, the days after his death meant something no family expects. Cameras outside their home, strangers weighing in on their son's character, and a private tragedy turned into a public flashpoint before they'd even had time to grieve. None of that was supposed to happen. Not the national eulogy, not the celebrity funding, not a reverend flying in to speak over the casket of a teenager most of the country had never heard of 3 weeks earlier. Because before any of it, before the audio, before the headlines, before his name reached past Jackson County, Nolan Wells was just a freshman receiver, looking forward to a holiday weekend with his friends. That weekend started on July 4th, a holiday built for celebration, and it would be the last one he'd ever see. There was nothing about the days before July 4th that stood out. No arguments recorded, no warnings, no red flags anyone has since come forward with. By every account made public so far, it was an ordinary lead-up to an ordinary holiday. Horn Island sits about 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, inside the Gulf Islands National Seashore. It's uninhabited, no roads, no cell towers, no way on or off except by boat. For locals along the Gulf Coast, It's a 4th of July tradition. Anchor offshore, wade onto the sand, spend the day away from everything. It's protected land, managed by the National Park Service, pristine, undeveloped, and exactly the kind of place that draws holiday crowds precisely because there's nothing else there. No lifeguards, no official presence beyond the occasional ranger patrol. Whatever happens on Horn Island stays between the people who are on it. That's where Nolan was headed, with a group of friends and acquaintances he'd known from around Ocean Springs. Multiple boats made the trip out that morning, part of a wider gathering of young people drawn to the island for the holiday. Nolan's group traveled on a boat, later identified in some reports as the Triton, though that name has never been officially confirmed by investigators, and it's worth treating with caution. By midday, the island was crowded. Music, coolers, groups spread out along the shoreline. For a few hours, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a holiday. Nobody on that beach knew they were spending the last ordinary afternoon of Nolan Wells' life. Because somewhere between the water and the sand, something happened that no two accounts agree on. And when the sun started going down, one boat would leave Horn Island without him. The call came in through Sea Tow, a marine towing service that fields exactly this kind of emergency along the Gulf Coast every holiday weekend. Someone aboard the boat radioed in. Their bilge pump had failed, and water was coming in faster than they could manage. 7 people were on board. The dispatcher stayed on the line, relaying details, trying to keep the caller calm while help got underway. For a moment, it looked like a straightforward rescue. A local towing captain responded, and according to that captain, before he even reached the boat, he got word the emergency was over. The message came from Jerry Adkerson, the grandfather of the boat's owner, who told him the situation had been handled. By his account, no one else independently verified that the boat was safe before the captain turned back. No tow needed, no further assistance required. The call was logged, filed, and would have stayed a footnote if not for what happened next. That should have been the end of it. A scare, a fixed pump, a group of teenagers heading home a little shaken. For weeks it was. Then TMZ published a different version of the same recording, longer than the original, and, they claimed, digitally enhanced to pull out details buried in the background noise. Almost overnight, that audio became the most dissected 10 seconds in true crime that summer. Clips racked up millions of views within days across social media. True crime forums broke the recording into frames, arguing over a handful of syllables buried in wind and static. But the experts who actually examine audio for a living didn't agree on what they were looking at. Robert Freed, a forensic video and audio analyst, said the TMZ version ran roughly 20 seconds longer than the original call and carried a different digital signature altogether, a red flag, in his line of work, for tampering. Authentic emergency recordings, he said, don't behave that way. Jonathan Gilliam, a retired FBI agent, reached the opposite conclusion. He reviewed the same recording and said there was nothing in it that suggested anything sinister at all. 2 experts. 1 recording, 0 agreement. Nobody's ever explained why. And that's the tension this case has run on ever since. Not because anyone's proven what happened, but because nobody credible has been able to rule anything out either. If you want every update on this case the moment it breaks, subscribe now, because the audio isn't even the part investigators are most focused on. By the time the boat made it back to shore that evening, one thing was already true. Not everyone who left the mainland that morning was on it. By the time the boat carrying Nolan's friends turned back toward the mainland, the timeline of his final hours had already started to fracture. Every version of what happened next depends on who's telling it, and no 2 versions line up. The last widely corroborated sighting places him on Horn Island at roughly 3 in the afternoon. One friend, identified in different reports only as Warren, told investigators he spoke with Nolan around that time, and that Nolan said he planned to catch a ride back with another group. That single detail would end up carrying enormous weight. But the record on who that friend actually is has never been cleaned up. One account names him as Warren Hudson, a friend who later spoke publicly about that conversation. A separate account ties the name to the son of a local judge, also named Warren. Whether these are the same person has never been officially clarified. In a case built on who said what, even the name of the last person to talk to him isn't settled. What happened after that conversation depends entirely on who you ask. Some reports identify a 19-year-old named Katie McCormack as the person Nolan was last seen speaking with, and suggest he chose to stay behind because of her. Her sister Gracie McCormack has publicly rejected that version of events, disputing the idea that Nolan stayed on the island for her sister at all. Neither account has been confirmed by investigators. It's a detail that would follow the case for months, an unverified rumor about a girl on a beach, treated by the internet as established fact almost the moment it appeared. 21-year-old Bart Edmonston Jr., who'd helped keep the sinking boat afloat hours earlier, was reportedly among those who made it back to the mainland that evening. What time that actually was is its own open question. Some reports put the boat's departure at 4:30 in the afternoon. Others describe witnesses who say they saw Nolan alive on the island as late as 6 o'clock, a full 90 minutes after the boat carrying his friends was already supposed to be gone. 2 days after he was reported missing, on July 6th, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office made its first public statement on the case. No foul play was suspected, they said. At the time, it read as a routine update on a missing swimmer. That contradiction, an official investigation calling it non-criminal at the very moment witnesses were describing him alive, hours after his friends said they'd left, became the thread that pulled everything else apart. The witnesses placing Nolan on the island past 6 o'clock became central to the case attorney Tyler Cox, built for the friends who'd been on that boat. He said 2 people, both of whom knew Nolan personally, made a positive identification. Investigative reporter Dave Mack pushed back on air, asking the obvious follow-up, if witnesses saw the boat leave, where was the video of it coming back? None has ever surfaced, only footage of it leaving hours earlier. Trial lawyers Susan Hendricks and Greg Morris raised a harder problem. An identification made from a distance, hours after the fact, rarely survives cross-examination. How far away were the witnesses standing? What was the lighting? Had they been drinking? Nobody offering the 6 o'clock sighting has answered any of it. So here's what investigators were left with by the end of that week. 2 witnesses who say Nolan was alive at 6. A boat that logged its departure at 4:30. A sheriff's office that saw no reason yet to call it anything but an accident. And an island that 2 days later would give up his body and raise more questions than it answered. The search for Nolan Wells lasted just under 2 days. Multiple state and local agencies, including the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, coordinated the effort across miles of protected uninhabited wilderness, sand, marsh, and scrub pine, with almost nowhere to hide and almost nowhere easy to search either. Every team had to be ferried in and out by boat. There's no bridge to Horn Island, no road, no direct power or water. That alone dictated how the search unfolded. Hour by hour, boatload by boatload. Through July 5th, they found nothing. On the morning of July 6th, a National Park Service ranger located Nolan's remains near the island's northwest tip. His family finally had an answer to where he was. They still had none for what happened to him. Buried in that discovery was a detail that got almost no attention outside the case itself. According to the county coroner, Horn Island hadn't recorded a single drowning death in 6 years. Whatever took Nolan Wells, it happened somewhere that almost never claims a life the way early reports suggested his had ended. That's where the forensic questions start. Human remains detection dogs, cadaver dogs, are trained to pick up the scent of decomposition, and according to canine expert Jeff Shetler, that process can begin surprisingly fast, within 45 minutes to 3 hours of death, under the right conditions. But Shetler is clear about the limits too. Foot traffic, weather, and elapsed time all degrade a scent trail, and a crowded holiday beach is close to the worst-case scenario for tracking one. Forensic professor Joseph Scott Morgan, who has worked more than 10,000 death scenes over his career, explains why the science moves that fast. Decomposition begins at the cellular level the moment a person dies. 2 compounds, putrescine and cadaverine, start forming almost immediately as cells break down, and they're what the dogs are actually trained to detect. It isn't intuition, it's chemistry. By the time Nolan's body was found, that chemistry had already been at work in Gulf Coast heat for roughly the length of the search itself, a detail that would matter enormously because it meant the state's official autopsy would face real limits before it even began. Then came a second exam. An independent pathologist, brought in separately from the state's own investigation, found something worth noting: reddish discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. On its own, that finding proves nothing. It doesn't confirm an injury, and it doesn't rule one out. What it does is raise a question neither autopsy has been able to close, because decomposition at that stage doesn't just complicate a cause of death. It can erase the evidence needed to determine one at all. More than a month after Nolan Wells died, here's what the science actually settled. One official autopsy that still hasn't been made public. One independent autopsy that raised a red flag it couldn't fully explain. And a state that, heading into the fall, still had no official cause of death on record. The body had answers. It just didn't have enough of them left to give. The phone became the next battleground. Nolan's parents said all along they were willing to hand it over. On July 15th, they met with the district attorney's office and agreed to release it, but only with an independent expert present to observe the extraction. Someone outside law enforcement who could vouch for how the process was handled. Everyone in that room walked away thinking it was settled. Then almost a month passed with no follow-up. On August 12th, the DA's office sent a letter with a deadline attached. The family had 24 hours, according to one account, or 48 according to another, to turn the phone over. There was a problem. Nolan's parents were out of state at the time, at a public event, and by the time they saw the letter, the deadline had all but expired. To their team, it read less like a request and more like a trap. Extracting a phone isn't as simple as scrolling through it. Digital forensics expert Scott Aker, a 22-year FBI veteran and founding member of the Bureau's Cellular Analysis Survey team, has explained how the process actually works. Investigators use specialized software to pull a complete copy of everything on the device, including data marked deleted, which often isn't gone at all, just hidden until the phone overwrites it. Done correctly, with the right people watching, nothing about that process should be controversial. But by mid-August, the FBI itself had stepped in to assist, not just with the phone, but with the broader digital trail investigators were trying to piece together across roughly 60 witnesses interviewed so far. That number matters. 60 accounts and still no single agreed upon version of what happened on Horn Island that afternoon, which is what makes the next report so significant. A 22-page independent analysis built from photos, video, GPS data, and witness statements gathered separately from law enforcement reached a conclusion investigators hadn't stated publicly: a material gap in the timeline between the last confirmed sighting of Nolan and the time his friend's boat is documented leaving the island. Not proof of anything, but a gap law enforcement's own early statement never accounted for. A separate volunteer group, the United Cajun Navy, ran its own analysis of boat movements that day and reached similar timeline concerns, a second independent set of eyes landing in roughly the same place. Meanwhile, the basics are still missing. Toxicology results, whether Nolan had anything in his system that afternoon, still haven't been released, more than a month out, and the second autopsy, performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell and funded by former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, ran into its own limit. Examiners couldn't assess his throat. It wasn't there to examine. Layered on top of all of it, AI-generated videos and fabricated claims about Nolan and his family started circulating online, forcing his mother to publicly separate fact from fabrication in real time. A distinctly modern problem no investigation in this case was built to handle. It's not the first time evidence has gone sideways in a high-profile death. In Philadelphia, the disputed suicide ruling in the Ellen Greenberg case was shadowed for years by a scene that was professionally cleaned before it was fully processed, and a laptop that left the apartment and was never examined. Nobody's alleging that here, but it's the standard defense attorneys and independent experts keep invoking, that once evidence is gone or handled wrong, there's no getting it back, which is exactly what Nolan's family says they were trying to prevent the whole time. While investigators fought over a phone and a timeline, a second case was quietly building around the first one, and it had nothing to do with what happened on Horn Island. As the story spread online, people connected to the case started receiving threats, witnesses, officials, even the judge whose son had spoken to Nolan that afternoon. None of the people making those threats had ever met Nolan Wells, his family, or anyone who was on that boat. They were strangers, radicalized by a case they'd only ever seen through a screen. In Illinois, a man named Edward James Porter now faces federal charges over threats tied to the case, a level of prosecution reserved for exactly this kind of conduct, when threats cross state lines or target people connected to an active investigation. Federal involvement here means prosecutors are treating this as more than an online outburst. In Ohio, Michelle Francine Edwards was charged separately, this time over bomb threats. Not vague hostility aimed at a case she'd read about, a specific targeted threat serious enough to trigger its own law enforcement response, entirely apart from anything happening in Mississippi. And in California, Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumarche became the third person charged, again for threats connected to people tied to the investigation. 3 states, 3 separate prosecutions, 3 people who, as far as anyone has reported, had no connection to Nolan Wells, his family, or the friends who were with him on July 4th. What they had in common was a case that had migrated from a regional news story into something closer to a national obsession, and a willingness to turn that obsession into threats against real people. Here's what that means for the record. As of now, the only criminal charges filed anywhere in connection with this case aren't about what happened to Nolan Wells. They're about what strangers did afterward from 1,000 miles away to the people trying to find out. No one has been charged with hurting him. No one has been charged with covering anything up. The people facing prosecution right now are the ones who turned a grieving family's tragedy into a target list. That imbalance, real charges for the noise around the case, and still nothing for the case itself, is where the investigation stood heading into the fall. If you've been with us this long, you already know this story isn't close to over. Subscribe now because the next update covers what happens when a grand jury finally gets involved, and whether any of this finally gets an answer. By mid-August, this case had stopped being a regional story. Attorney Eric Hertz, representing the family, told reporters in Atlanta he expects the case to reach a grand jury within roughly 30 days. An estimate, not a promise, but the clearest timeline anyone connected to the family has offered publicly. The Jackson County District Attorney's Office has been careful about what that actually means. Presenting a case to a grand jury is standard procedure for any unnatural or suspicious death in the county, and doing so doesn't by itself indicate a crime occurred. That distinction hasn't slowed the political pressure building around it. On August 12th, the Congressional Black Caucus sent a formal letter to Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Kash Patel, requesting an independent federal review of Nolan's death. The Justice Department was given 7 days to respond. No public response has followed since, Congresswoman Lucy McBath stood beside the family the next day and made the caucus's position public. They want a full federal investigation into what actually happened to Nolan Wells. Money entered the case early, and it's still on the table. At Nolan's funeral, Reverend Al Sharpton and Tyler Perry announced a $100,000 reward for information leading to answers in his death, a reward that, as of this recording, nobody has publicly claimed. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has maintained its own position throughout. Sheriff John Ledbetter has said there was no initial indication of a crime, while insisting his department is working to determine exactly what happened. District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath's office has said the state's completed autopsy will stay sealed until a grand jury reviews it, meaning the public still doesn't have an official cause of death, more than 6 weeks after Nolan's body was recovered. On August 19th, what would have been Nolan's 19th birthday, his family marked the day publicly, with attorney Ben Crump announcing a national day of prayer instead of a celebration. Weeks earlier, hundreds of miles away, New Orleans held its own tribute. Organizer Reuben Evans led a second-line procession through the city in Nolan's honor, telling the crowd the Wells family wasn't standing alone, even if nobody could tell them yet what actually happened to their son. That's where this case sits right now. A federal review requested but not confirmed. A grand jury expected but not scheduled. An autopsy completed but not released. And a family still waiting for one document, sealed in a prosecutor's office, to tell them what an entire summer of investigations hasn't. We'll be covering the grand jury the moment it happens. Subscribe now, because when that document finally becomes public, this story changes completely.